Welcome to the Comfy Chairs, a podcast from 123 Limited. Today's episode is part of our series, Comfy Chairs Hard Questions, comfyHQ, a bite-sized offering to help grow our knowledge of leading and learning. During each HQ episode, I answer your questions about specific Comfy Chairs topics, or how to tackle day-to-day leadership challenges, or any other subject that fits in the beautifully broad category of leading and learning. So for today's answers from comfyHQ, I'm going to talk about making peace with feedback and the differences between leading and managing. What should I do about feedback I don't agree with? This is just hard. Before we get into the to-do part of this answer, let me acknowledge that sometimes feedback hurts. Ideally, the feedback giver doesn't intend you harm and is truly giving you a kindness that just happens to sting. But people are sometimes careless and cruel. It's important to know that the giver's motivation can play a part in how you react and respond. For now, though, we'll put a pin in that and focus first on you, the recipient of challenging feedback. I train and coach people to respond to all feedback, regardless of the source, topic, or nature of it, with just 2 words. Thank you. Why do I do this? Well, there are a few reasons. If someone has been bold enough to share feedback with you, it's important to express gratitude. If someone is providing feedback you asked for, you definitely owe them thanks. And if someone is giving you, let's call it spiteful feedback, saying thank you can disarm them. Ultimately, thanking someone for their feedback puts you in the right headspace and heart space, if you will, to receive and comprehend what you've heard. But thank you is just the first step. The real work comes in how you process what you've heard and decide what to do next. There are a number of skill sets related to feedback, giving, responding, so on. In this case, we're talking about the skill of receiving feedback, which includes the ability to remain open and curious. So you say thank you, and then you can begin to examine the feedback and choose how you will respond. When it comes to feedback you find disagreeable, you can begin the process of examining with a short list of questions to yourself. First, what do I dislike about this? How it made me feel, or what information I heard about myself? Second, am I responding this way to the content of the feedback or the person who delivered it? And third, is there any part of the feedback that I can use? And if so, how will I apply it to learn or change? I want to point out that this can apply to feedback that you don't agree with that still gives you positive input. For example, imagine your boss tells you that you did a great job on a presentation where you thought you bombed. You disagree. But what about this do you dislike, and will you choose to apply the feedback in the future? Because that's the real decision you have to make whenever you receive feedback. You can choose to ignore what you're being told, or you can accept it and learn something about yourself that will help you in the long run. Our response to feedback is the answer to the question, what have I learned? It could even sound like, well, I've learned I don't respond well when Steve gives me feedback. What will I do about that? The best feedback is useful. The good news is that you have the power of choice. Dismiss it, dwell on it, or learn from it. And your choice can transform even the least welcome feedback into a valuable lesson. What is the difference between leadership and management? I will confess, I use these terms interchangeably. I realize, though, that many people differentiate between leadership and management. In general, those that do view management as something that typically occurs on a smaller scale and focuses on operational responsibilities. That is, a department manager making daily staff assignments, for example. Management of this nature seems to be task-oriented, whether it be tasks employees perform or the tasks a team must complete, or even the tasks associated with a specific project. In contrast, leadership is somehow grander. Whether directing people or setting strategy, a leader is associated with things like vision and big picture concerns. In my experience, people who separate management from leadership associate the former with mid-level functions and the latter with senior or executive roles. Whether leading or managing, though, we can look at three forms of leadership or management: self, others, and work. Self-management is a way to define certain behaviors: self-control, adaptability, and the like. Then in contrast, self-leadership often implies a focus on professional growth or career advancement. Managing others, as I've mentioned, denotes the ability to make clear assignments and scope work appropriately to achieve certain business goals. Leading others, though, is often connected to concepts like inspiration or transformation. Less tangible, but sometimes seen as more admirable. Managing work is, again, task-oriented or connected to day-to-day needs. Leading work has shades of strategy and other large-scale or long-term concerns. The exact differences will vary based on your own experience and even work setting, but the broadest way to talk about how people typically separate management and leadership is to draw a line between what people are doing today and where the organization will be tomorrow. When we look at leadership and management through these three lenses, we actually see how much overlap exists. And that brings me to a bigger question. Why do we insist on treating them as entirely separate? Now, I imagine that some managers listening to this disagree with any definition of their work that limits them to tasks and day-to-day considerations. Or people who view themselves as leaders could be taking exception to the idea that leadership is less involved with scoping work or practicing self-control. At least, I hope so. Because I want to make the case for not treating leadership and management as entirely different. If we say leadership is all one thing and management is another thing entirely, we are creating the conditions that might allow us to view one as more valuable than the other. Separating leadership from management reinforces exclusive leadership models, like the great man theory that I have referenced and dismissed multiple times on this podcast. It suggests that only certain people are naturally born to lead. And when we buy into this mindset, we risk overlooking the fact that great leadership and great management are built, not inherited. Here's the question that led me to these opinions. Would I want to work with a manager who can't lead, or for a leader who can't manage? Ultimately, leadership and management are not opposing forces. They're two parts of the same role. So rather than asking how one or the other shows up, or if you lean more toward one or the other, ask yourself, what is it that you, your team, and your work need? And then use your answer to determine how you will show up and lead or manage. You decide. Talking about leadership and management made me realize that there are a number of words we use in the workplace without checking on our shared understanding. Either we don't study their meaning, or we skip the step of confirming that a word carries the same meaning for everyone. I'm confident that many people experience language in the same way that I do, in layers, where there can be a dictionary definition overlaid by my personal understanding and experience with the word, taking into account the present context, and any number of connections that can exist between our words and our thoughts. Because of this, I'd like to take a little time here to define some of the big idea words that get used a lot when we talk about leadership. Rather than pulling out my dictionary or searching the internet, I'm going to share what I typically mean when I use these terms. There are just 6 for your consideration today. And appropriately, I think we should start with leader. This is someone who other people look to for direction, regardless of role, setting, or title. In most cases, the leader is responsible for employees' performance and outcomes. The next term or word is mission. A company's mission is their purpose, why they exist and do the work they do. Vision is another common piece of corporate language, and it is the picture of the future the organization uses to guide plans and decisions. I like to talk about vision as the future we are working to make a reality. Mission and vision are often accompanied by values, which are the ideas, standards, or behaviors that a company states are priorities. We can shorthand values with what's important to us. Then there's culture. Sometimes you'll hear people use words like environment or climate to describe company culture. Personally, over time, I've landed on this definition. It is the sum total of people's contributions to the work experience. What we all do to make it what it's like to work here. Our last word for the day is strategy. This is the long-term plan or set of related plans that are designed to support the mission and fulfill the vision. Interestingly, we tend to differentiate strategy and tactic, but many dictionary definitions and plenty of thesaurus entries use one to refer to the other. This is an aside just to help illustrate why it matters for us to define our terms. I like ending here with a little conversation about language. It links today's topics, feedback and leadership, in a unique way, illustrating the importance of how we use words. In moments of feedback, words influence the message and the impact. Words shape how we lead, how we work, and how we connect with others. So this week, I want to encourage you to take a moment to notice the words you use. Do they mean the same thing to everyone around you? How do you know? And when you receive feedback, remember to pause, say thank you, and consider what you can learn. Your words matter, and as a leader, you can shape how ideas are understood, shared, and put into action. That's all for today. Thanks for listening, and thanks for sharing your questions. I always appreciate the chance to learn what's on your mind and share my thoughts. If you have a question for the Comfy Chairs, I'd love to hear it. Just follow the link in the show notes. And don't forget, Comfy Chairs Hard Questions drops every other week, right between our deep dive conversations on leading and learning. Next week, I'll be back in the Comfy Chairs with a conversation about developing leadership teams with guest James Madison. We'll see you then.